in shed number 2. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So this, hopefully, is going to be a studio of some sorts. Now I won't be down here recording every video here. I'm down in Surrey at my mother-in-law's. I'm in one of the sheds that she's got. And over the period of time since my father-in-law departed, this has really been used as an area to store things. But this is a great place for me to be able to record videos going forward. So this is affectionately known as Shed 2. There's more of an agricultural shed over this side of the house and something that was built a long time ago closer to the house. But this one is sort of hidden away. So those of you new to the channel have been asking me questions about what exactly is going on with the L322 and this engine woes that I've had. So I want to sort of start from the beginning. What caused this, what's the symptoms, what caused it, and how we've got from late October to we're into the first week of February, and what has gone on since then. So a couple of things before I get started on this is I will be doing a full walkthrough interview with Tim at Emporium Tuning when I pick it up in a couple of weeks. It's not too far away now of coming back on the road. But Tim and I will go and have an interview type discussion on everything they've found. Now this goes back to what I've been saying over and over again. The bad rap on these vehicles, that they're unreliable, etc, etc. And yes, you know who you are. You're the ones that love to criticize it. 99.9% is because of what had happened before you bought that vehicle. And I am now testament to that. I thought I had a pretty solid vehicle because I really didn't have any problems. However, what's transpired over this engine issue that we've had has now thrown up huge problems of bad parts, piss poor workmanship, bad garages. You'll be shocked about what we've found. So let's go all the way back to the beginning and how do we get to this point. So after I came back from Spain and Portugal in the middle part of October, I was running into issues where if I started up the car, the whole thing would vibrate. It was like it was misfiring. And gradually as it warmed up, it will go away. I had no error codes, absolutely nothing at all. I went to Wales and there was a particularly cold night. I think it was in the latter part of October. Same thing happened again. Started it up. I had billows of white smoke coming out the back and gradually it calmed itself down when it got warmer. Driving it, no real issues. It performed okay. It would accelerate okay. Because it's had a remap, you would see black smoke out the back, but that's only if you really hit it. So I knew that there was something wrong, and when I called Tim, because originally I'd started to say, Tim, all of the pulleys, bearings and everything at the front are beginning to rattle. There's definitely problems that is coming. It's 150,000 miles on the vehicle. I seriously doubt anybody had changed any of the bearings or the tensioners or the pulleys at the front of the engine. They were squeaking, they were rattling. It needed done. So at the end of October, my MOT was due probably in the first couple of weeks of November. I took it over to Halfords in Chiswick, figured simple, make an appointment, get it MOT'd, then get it down to Tim when I could. They stopped that MOT probably about 15 minutes in. I got a phone call and said, sorry, we cannot continue. Health and safety, it is leaking diesel out of one of the injectors. So I picked it up, had a look at it, couldn't really see what they were talking about. And then I went over to Helsinki for the first week with a new job that I'd started. Booked it in to go to Tim's, I think it was around about the 7th of November. And so for me to get to Tim's, it's London to Worcester. It's about 2 hours, it's straight up the M42, it's a fairly easy drive, it's not difficult. So I got it really early on the Sunday morning, started it, and the same problem was back. This really lumpy tick over. Fired up fine, but you could feel the car vibrate and shake, and then gradually it warmed up. Problem solved. Drove it to a service station, probably about half an hour away from where Tim's garage is in Worcester. Stopped, got a coffee, went back in, fired it up, and then got restricted performance mode. So I plugged in the OBD2, my gap tool, reset everything, saw nothing major there. It went away. Fired it back up, was fine. Didn't really feel any of the lumpy starting or the engine vibrating or any of that. Drove out of the service station, 2 miles up the road, bang, restricted performance. So I figured, right, what I'll do is I'll just take it really easy and gradually work my way to where I needed to go. About 20 minutes away from where Tim is, all of a sudden everything just stopped. It shut down, engine stopped. I had some warning, can't really remember what it said. It was on my engine system failure. And then I cruised up the ramp. Luckily I just cruised up the ramp, which is in front of me. It was about half a mile away. Wrestled the thing into a side street, called green flag, waited for him to show up. While I was waiting there, I figured, okay, what is wrong? I had a look around, I could smell diesel. I tried to start it, it would turn over. So clearly the engine wasn't seized. Something else had happened there which had caused this failure. And when it did go into this mode, where it was engine system failure, I saw this plume of white smoke out the back. I heard no banging, I heard nothing out of the engine, it just stopped. So the car was picked up, put on the back of a ramp truck, and within half an hour when all this happened, rolled into Tim's, off the back, we plugged it in, couldn't really see what was wrong with it. By then, the battery had decided, I'm not going to turn it over. So what transpired from there was, I didn't need the vehicle. And a few people have said, well, why has it taken so long? I've not pushed them. I don't really need the vehicle. I've been busy in Helsinki with work. So it's not something that I desperately needed back in 2 weeks. So they went through the diagnosis of trying to figure out exactly what they thought was wrong with it. So the starter motor had crapped out. I knew it was on its way out. And part of the reason by going to see Tim was if it needed a new starter, because it was probably the original, replace it. If it needs a new alternator or it's the original, replace it. To me, this was preventative maintenance. 150,000 miles on a vehicle, 12, 13 years old. It's going to fail at some point in time, let's face it, they are. And so it was easy for me to just say, replace it. So it was always going to have those things done, starter motor, etc. So both mega fuses were blown. They found a short somewhere at the back of the engine, which probably caused the mega fuses to blow. There were some questions around the battery, which had only been replaced about 2 weeks previously. So that was fine. So Tim went through a whole series of diagnosis over a period of a couple of weeks to figure out what the hell had gone wrong with this. Now in hindsight, I probably should not have driven it in extent when it was gone into this limp home mode. I should have just stopped, called green flag, got them to pick me up. But because it reset itself, and we know that these vehicles can be finicky with things like that, I thought, okay, it will just go away, I've reset it, but of course it came back. So in hindsight, I probably should have just stopped, figured out how to get picked up, and then get it ramp trucked over to Tim. So they'd finally got it running probably about a week later. And bear in mind, they weren't working on this 100% of the time. So what they managed to do was to get it running, but realize it would only run without it connected to the intercooler, which to them showed that something had gone wrong with the turbos. So a whole series of things that had to happen to diagnose what the problem was. And clearly they thought, and they confirmed, both turbos had gone. Now this could be a consequence of the turbos were on their way out. It could be a consequence of the fact that I had problems with these gases escaping from 2 injectors. They found that 2 injectors that were leaking diesel didn't have copper washers on them. So that's number one. Somebody had taken these out previously and not put copper washers back in where the injectors were. Now I had receipts for this vehicle having both turbos replaced at 100,000 miles. So the engine has to come out to do those things. And then what transpired was a whole series of issues they found around what had actually happened previously, or probably previously. So to get the turbos out and replaced, the engine's got to come off of the subframe. So they found a whole series of things around how it was bodged and put together or back together. So number one, a silicon pipe had been over tightened on the plastic joint. You can see all the pictures that are overlaid here. And it had been cracked, but the plastic had never been found or taken out. So they actually found the remnants of that plastic in the silicon pipe, which had been rattling around in the intercooler. They also found that the bolts holding the subframe where the engine were had been cross-threaded. So the whole thing had been put back together at some point. Clearly somebody had not tightened them up with a ratchet. They probably just put an air gun in it, over-tightened them, up it went. They also found that there was a leak in the radiator. The radiator was leaking as well at the bottom of the core. So there's been a whole number of things that they've sort of found with this. There's a bunch of pipes. The one thing that you can see here is the power steering tube hose that comes from the union to where the actual power steering unit is, somehow was bent at 90 degrees. Somebody had bent it to get it back in to fit when the engine went back in, probably when the last time the turbos were done. So as you go through all of these things, they begin to show you how badly bodged those original two turbos that were replaced at 100,000 miles, all of the damage that had been caused. Now, a couple of people have said, this is going to hurt the wallet. Well, yeah, it might. Now, I'm not running this as a budget build. You can see the stuff that's gone on this vehicle. I have not taken this as a budget build. So I've gone to use the best quality parts for the vehicle that I can afford. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not going to hurt, because it will. The final cost of putting this back together again is not going to be a cheap fix. Now, I look at it this way. I will be keeping the vehicle for another at least 3 to 5 years. And this is a hobby to me. So to me, the rationale is get it fixed. Somebody said, why didn't you just buy another vehicle? Well, why would I do that? Why would I go and buy another vehicle not knowing its full history based on what I've uncovered with this one, and could end up with a whole series of worse problems by buying another vehicle unknown? Now, I have the full service history of this vehicle. I've seen all of the oil changes which were done by a Land Rover dealer. Everything else has been done. I've got full service history with this. Now, latterly, as the vehicle has changed hands, when it's come out of warranty, etc., previous owners, and there's been 3 of them, I think the last one bodged huge amounts of things that were done on that vehicle, my vehicle, purely because they couldn't afford to keep it running. And so cutting corners, taking the cheap way out to get the vehicle either running again so they could flog it, which I think is what happened, it's unbeknownst to me. You know, when you buy these vehicles, do you start crawling around deep inside the engine looking at absolutely every single pipe? Do you look at the bends in the power steering pipe? You may see it, you may not be able to see it. Do you really go to that in depth when you look at buying a car? You definitely will not be able to see the plastic rattling around inside the silicon hoses. So there's things like that you just won't see. So you're just taking a leap of faith based on previous ownership, service history, and praying that you're buying a decent one. Now, clearly for me, I still think I've got a decent car. The bodges have been worked on and been fixed as I've gone through. I'm perfectly comfortable with this, making sure that it's good to go forward. Now, there could be one other issue that we've not addressed with this, is that we did a compression test, or rather Tim did a compression test, and found that one of the cylinders was down. Now, it wasn't down significantly, but it was definitely 10% out from the others. There's a number of things that it could be. Could it be a blown head gasket? Could there be a sticking valve? Could there be a whole series of other things that go on there, carbon buildup, etc.? We just don't know. At this stage, we don't think it's necessary to go do it. But I think going forward, maybe into next winter, I go look at getting the heads rebuilt. But for me, again, it's going to be a long-term project. It's going to be looking at preserving the vehicle going forward. And if it needs to get done, it needs to get done to preserve it. And then hopefully all the other ancillaries on that engine that have been replaced, starter motor, alternator, bearings, pulleys, belts, turbos, all of that is new now on that engine. So really it's just the guts of the engine itself that potentially would need to be addressed. The other thing that got added on there as well while the engine was out was a new water pump. So there's a new water pump on the front of that as well. It just made perfect sense with the front of the engine was all out. So we're not too far away. Tim's waiting on a couple of more hoses to arrive. The power steering pump pipe needs to be done. Hopefully we're not too far away from it being fired back up. So it will need to go for an MOT as well, and then I need to go get it aligned as well. The reason why I need it aligned is the rear subframe bushes were collapsed, so Tim replaced those. The front subframe has come off. All of that, wheels have been off, all of the suspension arms have been off when it got dropped down. So it's going to have to go back and get it realigned to make sure everything is good. So I don't think I'm too far away from getting it back. And like I said, when I go back and get it, I will do an interview with Tim and he will go absolutely through everything that he found and the problems that they'd uncovered with working on a 12-year-old 150,000 mile L322. So that's it. The next video will be me picking up with Tim. I hope that answers all the questions that I've had about this over a period of what's happened. Unfortunately, I shouldn't have buried the L322 update in the last video I did around all the winch bumper. So this is it. This is the full history of what's actually happened that has caused these problems. Comments down below what you think. I think, again, this is just down to piss poor maintenance, piss poor workmanship, sub-quality parts, combination of all of this that have caused what I now end up with, which is basically a broken L322. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been of interest to you. Don't forget to click and subscribe, like the video if you like the video. And with that, I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.